What's up, Blazies? It's Casey Ariel, founder of Blaze Group and your host of Blaze Group Radio. I will be talking about the intersections of Black womanhood, entrepreneurship, news on the culture, and healing as we climb. I launched Blaze Group after spending a decade in corporate America structuring multi-billion-dollar loans for large tech firms, but never once working on a deal team with another Black woman. I left to take world-class knowledge to the streets. Blaze means building leaders and accepting zero excuses, and we go beyond the bare minimum. More than solutions, we create lifelines that help Black women become as limitless as they feel. Snuggle up to this episode. May it feel as safe and nourishing as Big Mama's house did. Hey Blazies, it is Tuesday, July the 16th, 2024, and today I want to unpack Project 2025. So more and more people are hearing about Project 2025. Taraji P. Henson, during the BET Awards, she got on the mic and talked about the importance of understanding and reading about Project 2025 and taking the election very seriously. We are 111 days away from the general election in the United States, 111. And I want to make sure that amongst family time, right, I really unpack what this thing is, how we should be thinking about it, and definitely spur conversations in your own households, with your own families and community members, your nieces, your nephews, your churches, so have you. Now, I'm going to break down, okay, what it is. I want you to understand that there is nuance in this thing. Much like anything in reality, it is not purely black or white. There is nuance to everything. And so I want to give enough context so that you're able to wrestle with the nuance and help your loved ones do the same. So let's start here. Donald Trump started his first presidential term in 2016, right? And when he went into office, he did not have a big concrete plan about how to govern, right? And so as he is up for re-election against Joe Biden, there's an activist group called the Heritage Foundation that has essentially worked to come up with this plan that is an off-the-shelf solution of policies, et cetera, for Trump to pull on, or any Republican president should they go into office. Now, I will say, every 4 years, there are these conservative groups that come together to outline policies for the next Republican presidential candidate, right? To kind of study, speak on, and then implement should they make it into office. So this idea around putting together a plan by this conservative group called the Heritage Foundation is not new. Okay, there are actually over 100 different groups. There are hundreds of groups, actually, like a couple hundred groups that come together to proactively put these plans and blueprints in place, right, for 4-year presidential terms. What's different this time, though, is this level of scale that this plan has. Okay, the difference this time is scale. So Heritage Foundation is actually organized over 100 different groups, conservative groups that would typically kind of do their things in silos together to put together a 922-page plan that is called Project 2025. And the intention is that starting in January 2025, a presidential candidate has off-the-shelf verbiage for executive orders to put in place, has these plans for appointing officials, has plans for policies around diversity, equity, and inclusion awards, and the Department of Education, and so having immigration, etc. This is a 922-page document, okay, that has pulled together a lot of co-authors to really be the off-the-shelf solution that Trump implements. Okay, so hopefully that is helpful. I also want to note that this plan came out a little over a year ago because, as I mentioned, right, every 4 years you have these conservative groups that do come together, right, to organize these plans to guide the next presidential um, elected official. Okay, over a year ago, the Heritage Foundation held this summit. Okay. And at this summit is where they revealed Project 2025. So if you have not heard of this 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you are not late. Okay. The whole purpose of us having this conversation is making sure that this information is timely, right? That you can stay at pace with these evolutions as they're happening and you have discussions with your people so that you can mobilize action. Okay. And at this summit, they revealed Project 2025, and they noted that the intention is that the president is ready in January 2025 to mobilize action. Because again, when Trump entered office in 2016, he wasn't really ready for the plan, right? So this time you have a very lengthy attempt, okay, to give him, spoon feed him the plan. And at this summit, the president actually stated that they want to weaponize a conservative army, right? Like this time they want the action to be very, very aggressive to reshape the country. Now, we have heard Trump talk at length about reshaping the country. The whole idea around Make America Great Again, right, is intended to shape the country. And so this Republican ideology that is included in Project 2025 is not unlike, right, what Trump talks about. But I will note that Trump did not author the 922-page Project 2025 manifesto, the plan. I don't think anybody's surprised about that. Okay. He did not author that. In fact, Trump actually came out at the top of July 2024 saying he has nothing to do with the plan. He does not know who wrote the plan. It is not his plan, right? He was a bit disgruntled, right, in the way that he talked about it. And if we know Trump, right, if we watch Trump and observe Trump, Trump really does want to have a high level of command, right? He wants to do what he wants to do. He does not want to have, too many guardrails around what he can do, he himself can do, and he wants to centralize power to himself, right? And so I believe it was the next day, right? The Heritage Foundation was going to do this syndicated interview, and they actually canceled it the day after Trump said that, right? Now, does that mean that Trump is not going to utilize anything from Project 2025? Does that mean we should not care about Project 2025? The answer to that is absolutely not. Okay? Because when Trump comes into office, if he were to do so, same thing with Biden, right? But in 2016, right, I'll use it as an example. When Trump came into office, there were 4,000 folks that he had to appoint. 4,000 people, right? Trump today does not have the capacity, okay? He does not have the list of 4,000 people to appoint. And so it is very likely that folk who were a part of writing Project 2025 are going to be appointed, that he's going to tap on the expertise, right, of folk who are responsible, who have been responsible for writing this plan. And then they would enact these policies. So if you think about the full gamut of the disciplines and the areas that a president is supposed to govern over, right, to the extent that they don't have the intellect or the history or any strong opinions about a certain vertical, they rely, right, on their staff, on their officials, right? And in those instances, right, it is the bias, the viewpoints, the motives of said officials that really take center stage and mobilize, right, some of the things that they're set out to do. And so Project 2025 already, and that group already has a listing of thousands of folks that they recommended be appointed for any particular position so that this plan can be enacted. And it is highly likely, if Trump were to be elected, okay, that he is going to tap many folk that are part of this project, even if today he has not read 922 pages. I am not surprised that he has not read 922 pages, okay? It does not mean that he will not pull from the same leaders of this group, this collective of 100 different conservative activist groups who have put together this plan, and they will absolutely plan to execute on this stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there, make sure we understand that, right? And I will also say at the top of this month, Donald Trump actually did release like a GOP platform, right? Like some of the things that he plans to do if he were to win. This platform had like 20 bullets. It was not 922 pages, okay? It had like 22 bullets, mostly high level things around what he will do if he is elected to office. And what was interesting about this release at the top of the month, July 2024, was that he actually kept it very secret. He only worked with his close cabinet, okay? He did not let a lot of folks in, and so a lot of these conservative activists like were not privy to what was going to fall on this list. And in this GOP platform that he released, he actually deviated a bit from some of the like hard pressing issues of that conservatives have been fighting for a few decades. So, for instance, he said he's okay with same-sex marriage, right? He has no problem with that. He said that he does not want to put a federal ban on abortion, right? He actually wants to let the states decide. Now, for decades, the Republican Party has really pushed for a federal ban, right? So, again, he did not let a lot of folks in. That is very Trump-like. He wants to centralize his power, right? He actually wants to remove a lot of the independence that the Department of Justice has from the White House. He wants to actually control that a lot more. So that he can go after folk. Like he has already said that if he is elected, he's going to prosecute Joe Biden, for instance, right? So he did put out a plan. It is not lengthy though. There are a whole lot of gaps that need to be filled. And so again, Project 2025 and us understanding what it is and understanding who's a part of it is important to us because those folk are very likely, okay, to be appointed and mobilized if Trump were to win. Even if today he was not a part of that co-authorship. Okay. Trump's plan, again, about 20 bullets, a few paragraphs in there. It was initially 67 pages and they pared it all the way down to what it is now. And they're spinning it as this thing that's easily digestible, right, by any citizen. Obviously, the 922 page Project 2025 manifesto is not as digestible, right? But conversations like this one that I'm having with you, right? Conversations that you will have with your families, your communities, etc., your friends, people you care about are important, right? So that we actually understand the nuance, right? And why it is important that we show up to the polls, right? And make our voices heard through our vote, right? So a few things that are inside of this plan, right? And again, it is a plan. It was written by a conservative group called the Heritage Foundation. And you can think about it as a transition plan, right? It is transition planning, right? It is the proactive, right? Outlining, right? And policy making of what a president can come into office and kind of mobilize on day one to make sure that their agenda, right, is executed. So some of the elements are militarizing the southern border. This is very Trump-like, to be very honest, right? Like having the military there to close the borders and prosecute, etc. Another thing that is Trump-like is one thing I've already mentioned, where they want to kind of bring the Department of Justice under the rule of the White House, really centralizing the power there. Very Trump-like, so very tactical, if you will, that they would put something like that in there. Some other things are around dismantling the Department of Education. This one is big. This one is big, right? Because much like we've heard talks around, like in states like Florida, where they want to say that, the word slaves can't be used, and instead these were involuntary migrants, right? That's wild. This is what happens when there is less regulation around what is taught in schools, right? It is very dangerous. It is very dangerous to indoctrinate folk from youth, right? With untruths and things that don't allow them to see themselves and their history as accurately as it should be portrayed, so that they develop their own opinions, right, and ideals around what is right and wrong. The Project 2025 manifesto goes very heavily against protections for trans issues. I will note that Trump is very against that as well. His 20 bullet GOP platform talked about not allowing men. These are his words, to participate in women's sports, right? But Project 2025 is a lot more against, right, and has policy against LGBTQ plus rights, while Trump has softened his stance on that, and he says, hey, I'm okay with same-sex marriage, right? So these are some of the elements inside of this. I'm going to play a clip from Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, where she's actually interviewing a co-author of Project 2025. His name is Jonathan. Jonathan Berry. Jonathan Berry is his last name. I'm going to play that clip. I don't know if I'll let the full thing play, but just so you can kind of hear some of the things that she is articulating, as well as his responses to some of the things that he's articulating. Big ups to Representative Ayanna Pressley. She's been in her position since 2019, and she's been doing a lot of activism work and good stuff. Let me play that for you right now.
Mr. Berry, Chapter 18 of the Project 2025 manifesto is about the Department of Labor, and you are the author of that chapter, correct?
Lead author, yes. There's others too.
Yes, you are. I believe the American public should know exactly how you and the Republican majority that invited you to testify today want to sabotage the EEOC, rewrite the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and push all of us back to an era of Jim Crow racism. I'm shocked that my colleague across the aisle was in disbelief at our characterizations and assertions of racism and discrimination, when even former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said the Republican side of the aisle looked like the most restrictive country club in America. We all know that Make America Great Again is about making America white only again. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Although the subject matter of today's hearing is to be expected, it certainly makes it no less offensive or frightening. My Republican colleagues very often like to quote Dr. King, I don't know, maybe for some faux civil rights credibility or to pervert his words to suit your extremist needs, while working actively to undermine his legislative legacy. On the first page of Chapter 18, Project 2025 complains about how the Biden administration has been fighting for racial equity. On the next page, it calls for eliminating data collection on race and ethnicity in employment. On the page after that, it calls for rescinding an executive order signed in 1965 that prohibits discrimination in hiring by contractors. Mr. Berry, do these terrible ideas sound familiar?
They're great ideas.
These terrible ideas sound familiar? Of course they do. You came up with them. Mr. Berry, I find it shameful to advance a vision attacking the very policies and agencies that have helped Black Americans secure jobs, earn a living, and provide for our families. This Project 2025 plan is policy violence, plain and simple. Its authors have placed such a large target on the EEOC because of the incredible work the EEOC is doing today. Last year alone, the agency filed more than 27,000 charges of race-based discrimination. These workers and their families have a pathway to justice, accountability, and healing because of the policies and regulations that Project 2025 is trying to get rid of. Ms. Wiley, how would workers be harmed by Project 2025's commitment to undermining crucial protections that are enforced by EEOC and other federal agencies?
Well, essentially, it guts the ability to both be able to have the rights and have enforcement and protection of the rights that we already have, and we've been seeing improvements and advancements when we have been enforcing them. And I'm also deeply concerned with any suggestion that we should not be collecting data or that labor rights, the rights to organize, which has been so important for workers across race, including white men, to ensure that they're getting fair wages and safe working conditions. All of these are actually in that chapter, and they threaten our workplaces for people who are white, for people of color, for people of all backgrounds in this country. And I think that's why we all need to be concerned, because it really is about all of us.
That's right. They threaten our workplaces for every person who calls this country home. EEOC offers essential protections that create workplaces where all of us can thrive, but Project 2025 aspires to be the realization of a decades-long crusade by Republicans to strip away this key pillar of the Civil Rights Act. As a founding member of the Stop Project 2025 Task Force, I look forward to showing and telling the American people exactly who you are, Mr. Berry, along with your extremist friends. I urge my colleagues to join me in building the inclusive world we know to be possible, one in which everyone... Is there something funny?
No.
I didn't think so. Nothing funny about this. And in honor of my departed mother and for my 15-year-old daughter, I will do everything possible to stop you from building the world that you were hell-bent on doing. I urge my colleagues to join me in building the inclusive world we know to be possible, one in which everyone can show up to work free from discrimination. Thank you. I yield back.
Energy. So again, that was a clip. If you watch the video version of this, either on Spotify or YouTube, there are video versions of this podcast there. You can actually see the visual of that clip. But it's important that we understand this, right? And so the next question should be, what should we do? Okay, Casey. Okay, Blaze. I understand this a lot better, right? What can I do? Well, number one, right? It is important that you engage with nuanced conversation with your folk, right? Because there are valid concerns of the people, right? On one side, you have people now concerned that we are looking at a Joe Biden who is too old, that he is not the version of Joe Biden that came in, right, years ago. But at the same time, he's a known candidate on the Democratic side, right? And folks are seeing it as too risky to put someone else in place that is less popular, right? And risk the chance of Trump winning as a result, right? So, it is important that we have these conversations inclusive of, right? What is at stake when you have something like Project 2025, right? If something were to happen to Biden, right, if he's incapacitated in any way, right, then we have a Kamala Harris that becomes the first Black woman president, right, of the United States, right? What then? Like, let's really think about and talk about these implications, much like the other side is organizing proactively every 4 years to do, so that we can find our peace, right, make our plans, right, and continue on this plate, right, to make sure that this is home for all people who stand on this soil. On the other side, you have a convicted felon who says that he wants to reshape America, right? Much like Project 2025 is outlined, though it is not his plan, it is very likely that some of its people would come into his conservative army, if you will, as has been stated. Folk who want an American revolution, the second American revolution, they're saying these words, right? And they have a plan to do it. That is on the other side, right? So let's talk about these issues. It is very important. Some things that are important for the Democratic Party to do, right? Much like we've seen this very thoroughly fleshed out plan on the Republican side, right? It's important to talk about things like record job creation in de-industrialized parts of America, not the industrialized parts, but like we've seen more job creation in the last 20 years than we've seen in the last 20 years for de-industrialized jobs under the leadership of Biden. Talking about their working class agenda, right? Like, what are the tactical plans for the working class? We need to hear them talk about universal child care. That is important to folk, right? They need to hear that. They need to hear that there's a plan to expand Medicare more broadly. They need to hear that there's a plan to actually increase Social Security, as we fearfully talk about in our communities how Social Security might not be there when my generation and those that come after me get older, right? We actually need to hear the tactics. When I was at the Essence Festival a few weekends ago now, I heard Maxine Waters talk about the impact that she made as being, the head of the finance committee, right? And how that second issuance of $60 billion was actually spearheaded by her and the folks in that cabinet, because the first time most of the money went to very big corporations because big banks prioritized those corporations and didn't make sure it trickled down to communities. And so the second batch of PPP funding community-based businesses, right? And she said we have to actually talk about this. We have to spell it out, right? And at that level, if they need to spell it out at our levels, right, we got to spell it out. Much like Big Mama did and our aunties and uncles when we would go around the living room fireplaces, right, and just listen to stories and hear about the things that they did during their heydays, right? We must talk about it. We must make it plain. We must say it over and over and over again, because telling some people to just go research it isn't enough. That is not practical for a lot of people, right? But we can use our ancestral gift, right, and tradition of oration, right, to have meaningful conversation. Again, 111 days away from the election, and so definitely stay abreast of what is going on. The Democratic National Convention happened on August 19th in Chicago. The Republican National Convention started in Milwaukee yesterday, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so it's already happening. And then I'll lastly recommend a podcast that I think is a really good one. It's by a brother named Asteed Herndon. He works for the New York Times, but it's called Run Up Show, I believe. Let me look at make sure I'm saying that right. The Run Up podcast. It's a really good political podcast. And I think he does a really great job of asking the right questions of his guests on the show and making things plain. So listen to that. And then, of course, keep it locked with Blaze, right? We did not have a Blaze Virtual Summit in June by design and the way that we typically do those celebratory events. Keep it locked, because we're actually going to be having more political style summits. And political summits is where folk come together, right, to lessen tensions, right? The voices of the people are heard, the questions of the people are presented. Those who are in positions of power and gatekeeping influence, they're able to respond to things and share initiatives. And then the folks are able to tactically organize and come up with solutions. That's how we have to operate. Like, what is the list, right? What are the tactical plans? What can be mobilized, right? And so we're going to hold space for folk to come together and do that, right? So that they leave that space with tactics for their communities, right? It's not about virality. It's about like actual action, right? And words to repeat to our community. So keep it locked with Blaze. Definitely go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. We want you at that summit, Black Women Entrepreneurs, so that your voices are heard, so that you are able to mobilize change, tactical change, right? At arm's length in your community, right? Virtual is convenient, right? But community is medicine, right? So that's all for today. I hope that this was helpful. I know it was a little longer, but I believe that this was important to take up space for. So I'll see you next time. Love and light. Thank you so much for tuning in to Blaze Group Radio. Remember, you have not yet met all of the people in your life who are going to love you. So keep going. Download the Blaze Group app for day-to-day support on your entrepreneurial journey. Until next time.